All right, before we start this episode, I just wanted to put this out there that if you're listening with little ones and you aren't quite ready to talk about heavy topics such as loss of a loved one and
death,
then maybe you should save this one for later. Put in some headphones, obviously wired ones, and
no Bluetooth. Come on.
So if you're not quite ready to talk about this with the little ones, then here is your warning.
Warning.
You're listening to the Really Very Crunchy podcast with your hosts, Emily
and Jason.
We sound a little too happy to be having this conversation.
A little too chipper.
Yeah. Bring it down a little.
Okay. We're talking grief and loss today.
Really pertinent in our lives right now.
Yeah.
So I think I've been kind of asking you if you'd like to do a grief podcast for a little while.
And I've been ignoring you for a long time.
However long it's been since your mom passed away.
Yeah, it's like day 2. Hey, you want to do a podcast episode about grief and loss? Like, yeah, thanks. How about we have the funeral first?
Day 2, you're like, we need a podcast episode. What do you think it should be? And I'm like, maybe grief?
I'm kidding. You weren't insensitive like that. I'm joking. And in fact, that is sometimes how I deal with heavy topics, particularly grief, and is comedy.
Yeah. So one thing I think a lot of times, if you can find a way to laugh when you're grieving, it sort of lightens it a little. Like if you can find that first opportunity to laugh, there's like something breaks.
Yeah.
And you're able to just move forward a little bit. Like there can be happiness amidst the sadness.
Yeah.
And it feels like there's always going to be sadness. Like there will always be a part of me that is sad now that I've experienced loss. Like even in my fullness of happiness, like my most joyous moments, there's a part of me that's sad now.
Oh, yeah.
But I think whenever you're like experiencing that extreme sadness, if you can just find a way to laugh, then it helps so much. And I'm going to tell a story really quick.
Sure.
So after your mom passed away recently, our friend had made these cinnamon rolls for us like before she passed away, a week before she passed away. And she gave us like tons of icing to go on them. It was so much icing that we just had it stuck in the fridge because we weren't going to put it all on there. Anyway, so your mom notoriously drank her coffee with Coffee Mate, like glug, 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 like at least 40%
you could
of
pour
the
that
cup.
Coffee over your pancakes. It was so sweet.
Yeah, it was so much creamer. Anyway,
I stole that joke from a comedian back in the day about, he talked about sweet tea. He liked it so sweet you could pour it over your pancakes. So that's not my joke if you know what I'm referencing. So
nobody would have known.
Hey, just keeping it real.
Anyway, so you said something like, I'm going to have a tribute to Susan or something in your coffee. We had been drinking black coffee.
Yeah.
And you just took like the biggest scoop of that icing and stirred it into the coffee.
It was incredible.
It was so good.
We called it the Susan Special.
Susan Special. That's what you called it. Yeah. So then we had this whole like big glass container.
We had a Susan Special many days.
For like over a week, all of our coffee. We made it a Susan Special, and we laughed so hard when you were like, I'm going to make a Susan Special.
Yeah.
Something about that. Like we were kind of honoring her memory and drinking sweet coffee. Yeah. And it was really special and really sweet. And it felt like we can keep going.
Yeah.
You know, like little
moments like that are healing. Yeah. That was the best 2 weeks of coffee we've had. I kind of want one right now, but it's not like it has to, for whatever reason, it has to be that icing.
I know. It was so sweet.
Your friend made that. We need to get her to make us another tub of it. We're like, listen, I'm feeling really down.
Can you make me some of that frosting?
The grief has hit me really hard lately. I need some more of that icing.
I think it was essentially butter and powdered sugar and vanilla.
2 years from now, she's like, shouldn't you be like moving on a little bit? No,
I need more of that frosting.
Things are tough lately. I need more frosting.
By the way, crunchy tip, you can make your own powdered sugar. You just put sugar in a blender, and you can add a
Is
little
that
bit of
seriously all it is?
arrowroot powder. Yeah. I just like I need people to know that you can make your own powdered sugar.
We've got a new segment, Recipes with Emily. Dun, 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 dun. That said, I never used, at least that I know of, used humor in any kind of dishonoring way. I could see some people, that's not the route.
No.
That is not the route to take for, and it's not even the route for me in certain circumstances, obviously, when I'm feeling.
Yeah, it's not like you're going to try to be goofy.
Yeah.
But just like the Susan Special thing, or.
Yeah. Especially if you can connect it to something like that with the person that you lost.
Yeah. So different people deal with grief in many different ways. And like some people get stuck in it, and some people seemingly move past it really quickly. And so I don't know. Like
I do have a couple of potential for us icebreakers from comments. I put out this. Well, we put out this thing on YouTube. How do you deal with grief and loss? And there's some interesting answers. This person said, I lost 5 siblings in a year's time. I started a siblings memorial garden with a special section for each of them. My sister, who I was very close to, passed in April, and I was given a lilac bush. It bloomed 6 months later and in October. The blooms were white.
That's really sweet.
That was really sweet. And then, how do you deal with grief and loss? Somebody said, by avidly going to the gym, lifting weights, blasting my music, and forgetting my pain for a little while. I mean, yeah.
Throw yourself into a hobby, throw yourself into something. I sort of felt that when I was starting to knit. I mean, I just am learning. But as I was doing it, I was thinking like this rhythmic activity could really pull me out of my thoughts. So I just lost a friend. She and I talked almost every day, and we were like kindred spirit type of friends, not just a regular friend. I mean, that sounds weird, but just like a special connection. She was really more of a mentor to me. Mm-hmm. And I actually didn't know that she had passed because I wasn't close with her family or anything, and she lived far away. And I knew that she had cancer, but she seemed to be doing better. And so I messaged her, and I didn't get a reply. And so I messaged her again, and I didn't get a reply. And then I waited a few days, and I was like, maybe she's just not feeling well. But I sort of knew. So I Googled her name, and I found her obituary, and it was just
that's tough,
totally shocking to me. And so that was the same day that I learned to knit. And it just sort of helped me focus on something else instead of just replaying it in my head. There was some sort of weird grief of not knowing that she had passed. I felt like I should have known. I should have been able to feel it.
Well, I was actually going to ask you about that too, because that's not the first time that's happened to you.
Yeah, I had.
I mean, you've lost 3 friends to cancer. Mm-hmm. 2 of them a little bit older, not old by any stretch of the imagination.
In their 60s.
Yeah. But yeah, far too young to go this early, in my opinion. And yeah, that the thing about it, you learning about it later because your other friend had gone off to a monastery.
Yeah, she actually, church, right? Yeah, a Greek Orthodox convent.
Or I guess it wouldn't be monastery.
It could have been a monastery. I'm not sure what they call it. Anyway, she became basically the equivalent of a Greek Orthodox nun. And in her final days, and she couldn't have her phone much. I think she did have access to her phone, but she wasn't on it much because she was really trying to be devoutly absorbed in prayer and whatever they do in the Greek Orthodox Church. Yeah. And anyway, so I had messaged with her, and then she said she'll tell me later. It was something about Thanksgiving. I can't remember.
Tell you what later?
I think I was like, what are your plans for Thanksgiving? And she said, like, I'll message you tomorrow. And then I never got a message. And then I just never heard from her. But I was just thinking, like, she's just doing her stuff out in Arizona. And we didn't talk every single day, she and I. We would go like a month without talking and then,
then talk a bunch,
and then catch up for hours and just tell everything, and
especially when she lived here, you were near each other a lot.
Oh, yeah. When she lived in Paducah, we saw each other every other day. And she didn't have children. She was kind of lonely. I was kind of lonely because I didn't really have many friends, but I had our older son. Anyway, so I just didn't hear from her, and somebody who knew her family ended up like just halfway telling my mom over the phone. I was on the phone with my mom, and I said something about Terry, and she said, "Oh, Terry died," to my mom. And then my mom said, "Did you hear that?" And I was like, "What?" And she said, "Oh, Terry died." And it was so like just the worst way to receive the news. I wasn't prepared, and nobody seemed to care. It was just like so factual.
Well, to a lot of people,
"Oh, I have some really sad news for you."
But a lot of people did not have the same relationship that you and Terry had. This is your friend from like I don't know, half a decade ago.
Yeah.
And to some people, me included, sometimes she was kind of this out there person.
Quirky.
She's kind of this quirky person.
Strange. But I love her deeply. Yeah.
Clicked.
I'm a little weird.
You're a little quirky.
Yeah. The other day I went to this flower potluck, and this girl said something. She was like, "I don't know. You're the weird one. Tell us." And I was like, "Yeah, I am the weird one." Then later she said she was sorry for calling me weird. And I was like, "No, I am weird.
I get it.
Okay, I am.
I get it.
I know I am."
For those of you who have listened to all the episodes, Terry was the one who bean dip
ate
off the spoon
scraped her teeth
right into the casserole. Don't know what episode that was, but it's in there somewhere. But
anyway, I did love her, and we had a special connection. And just like that, shocking not knowing she was gone.
Yeah.
And then I had to go back and find like some of her family members so that I could ask them like what happened. Why didn't I ever hear about her funeral? And that's the same thing with my sweet friend Carolyn. I didn't know, so I didn't get to go.
For
and I totally
2
would have
weeks.
gone. Yeah.
Like she passed 2 weeks, and then you were up in the middle of the night thinking about her, and then Googled her name and found it. That's a tough way to find that out. I mean, especially her. She was a close friend and a mentor, like you said, like somebody that really poured into you in a way that not many people have.
No, not at all. She definitely caused a lot of healing for me.
Yeah.
In so many ways. Just, I felt seen.
Yeah. And I think another big part of this is that with Terry and Carolyn in particular is that they had a very special bond with our kids in a way. Particularly Oaks, and there's something special there, and I don't even know how to describe it. It's just it was this grandmotherly sense to them. They were almost like family. For me, extended family, because I didn't know them as well. But
yeah, definitely family to me.
And I think something that might even be frustrating for you is that, except for me, no one else in this world can see how close you truly were to both of these people.
Yeah, that hurt me because it was like I wasn't someone in their life.
Right.
Because I didn't even know.
Well, their family can't really know. Yeah.
Yeah. So that it hurt. It hurt my feelings, sort of like I didn't matter to them. But I know that I did. But nobody else could have known that.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's like these special relationships that when you're friends with, and I put this in quotes, and I'm not saying this about Carolyn, but if you're friends with a loner in a way, well, they're not just telling all the other people they know about you.
Well, I know
necessarily.
I know Terry, and I know Carolyn's husband knew, but I mean, he's also like stricken with grief and struggling with that. Right. Like, he shouldn't have to go out of his way to find me to tell me, because he's clearly just in a
no blame
spot.
thrown in any direction, of course.
Terry's family, I think they knew. They did know, because she had given me the key to her storage unit. And so then later they contacted me, like, after I knew, and they were like, "Hey, do you have the key?" I couldn't find it.
Listen. If you have the key to the storage unit, you're worth telling if someone has passed, okay?
That's true.
There's a hierarchy of people you tell first.
I had the
key.
The
person with the storage key.
I know. She gave us our juicer. Like, she tried to give me all of her possessions before she moved out to the monastery. And I was like, well, I'll take that handmade bookshelf. Yeah. Yes, sirree. Love it. Yeah. Your juicer? Sure. She gave me a lot of really great stuff, but I couldn't take all of it. So anyway, I lost the key to the storage unit.
They got in.
I'm sure they did. They never let me know.
Hey, well,
I had already gone through it. She told me to.
Next time I become best friends with one of your family members and they pass, tell me. And then maybe I'll just remember where the storage key is.
Yep. It's funny. Like, every time we go on a road trip, I feel like I have to prepare for our death. So,
oh yeah, you do that.
I like contact everybody I know.
You made me write this long, like,
weird
all
letter,
the information we ever have.
Here are our passwords. Here's how you do this, and then I'm like always like, Mom, give so and so the art hanging in the front hallway. So and so can have all my homeschool books.
Yeah,
and my hand woven rugs go to this person.
Yeah, I'm like, have a yard sale. Give it to our kids when they're 18, all, $400 of it. Yeah. Well, so my mom passed on July 3rd. Fireworks will never be the same again.
Was that your attempt at humor?
Not really. I mean, it really is going to be kind of this thing. I kind of wonder, like, 4th of July, am I going to be thinking about this every 4th of July? That's not great.
We actually went to a friend's house the day after it happened. It was kind of weird. Yeah. Because I was like, do you want to go? And you're like, well, what am I going to do? Just sit here?
Listening to everybody else's fireworks go off?
Yeah.
Yeah. It
was a hard spot to be in.
It's a weird thing.
Because you have to keep living. You have to keep living. You cannot stay in it.
I guess I could give a little explanation. My dad passed away 8 years ago, and when he passed, it was devastating to me. Devastating. Like, it was. He wasn't that sick, at least from what I knew. Mm-hmm. To he became very sick and passed within a month. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we were close as a whole family. We were all very close. And that was very, very hard to get over. That is a situation where I've dealt with it for years. I actually have just felt like in the last 2 years, maybe, where I'm more in the acceptance stage of grief, which, we had the 5 stages of grief. I'll read over it, whatever, but like, it doesn't work same way for everybody, but I feel like I just got into the acceptance part, and then my mom went downhill. Mm-hmm. My mom's obviously she had a stroke about 4 years ago, I think. It was, so that was just a few years after my dad had passed. Since then, it's just kind of been a slow downward.
And she knew that she would die within 5 years?
No, she had read a thing that people with
her type of
stroke, typically there are many times
it's
high
like
percentage. There's a high percentage that
years.
they pass within 5 years. Yeah.
So
I mean, she was.
But you don't really believe it.
No, you don't. You're
just like,
even as her
you're
son,
in the 20%.
Yeah, I mean,
you're definitely in the 20%.
You're optimistic, and I mean, you could say the same about one of your friends.
Yeah, she had lung cancer, and like it was stage 3 or close to 4 at first. They thought it was 4, and then maybe came back and said it was 3. Anyway, the chances were not good,
right?
But I was like, but you love to swim,
yeah,
and you eat healthy, and like you have all these things going for you that the people who don't make it are the ones who were smokers and whatever, you know,
those
like
are the things you want to believe.
Yeah. And I just like, I didn't believe that she would be one of the ones.
Yeah. So, well, my point that I was getting to is that it wasn't a shocking passing,
but it still is shocking.
No, and I'm not saying it's not shocking. I'm just saying it wasn't as unexpected.
Yeah, as your dad.
Because there was this progression of, well, yeah, she's getting worse. In fact, we had talked to doctors and things about hospice the day she passed.
I know. In my mind, I'm like, well, people go on hospice and people come off hospice.
They do. I know. We were optimistic even then. Yeah. I mean, there's
maybe I just have a little bit of the Pollyanna syndrome because I'm like,
I mean, that's good though. There's nothing wrong with that, though. It, kind of sets you up for a more devastated feeling. I dealt with the grief of my dad and the grief of my mom, and still dealing with the grief of my mom in different ways. My dad, I was more angry at the suddenness of it and more devastated of the wisdom that I would never get again. Like there's certain things that I have real trouble with is my dad never got to meet my kids. Oaks was born a year later. As when Oaks was born, that was one of the first thoughts I had, because I mean my mom was in the room when he was born, and I was like, my dad's never gonna, like, I remember saying, I think it was to my mom, like, my dad would have loved to see him, and
your mom, we have a picture of your mom standing there like after Oaks was just placed on my chest, and her face it's just like the most precious, proud grandmother face I've ever seen.
It is the happiest I think I've ever seen her, captured.
Yeah.
It's just
looking at that picture after she passed away, because we're looking for pictures to send to the funeral home, like that broke me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so like the stroke, like honestly, grief for me on my part of it, which I'm sure for her, she grieved in her own way for herself, started at the stroke because she lost so much of her feeling and half of her body. Like
she was an amazing pianist, and she lost her ability to play piano. And
she was teaching piano at the time. Yeah.
I always was so sad that our kids weren't going to learn from her.
Yeah. That's when grief started for me. So like we're talking several years of like this gradual, we're losing this, compared to like my dad, to where it was just like
so fast.
Just all the things, all the wisdom I wanted to get from him, I got so, and I still get angry when I talk to a 70-year-old man who says, I gotta go do something for my dad or do something for my mom. And I'm like, really?
How? Yeah,
you're 70 and you're going to go do something with your parents. Like a guy we were with this last week in Michigan, which great for him. Maybe he's in his 60s, took his dad hunting, one of his dad's last hunting trips. He's 91 or something like that.
94?
Or 94, I don't know. Maybe he was 91 at the time. Yeah. It didn't make me angry. It was like, that is such an awesome thing you get to do that.
You get
and I hate that I feel this way, that my mind goes here, but I'm 37.
Yeah, but you were
I was 30. Well, yeah, 29. I was 29. And which I understand. There's people who lose their parents when they're young.
Been young. I know.
Kids, and I can't imagine that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that. I was, however, in a place in life where I'm starting to mature more. I'm at that stage where I am a man. I've got these responsibilities. I'm about to have kids.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I would love to talk to you, Dad, about some of the things that you went through.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I think that was the difference between your dad and your mom's passing, is that with your dad, there's a lot more regret.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of regret there. Particularly I mean, there was just a lot of, when I was a teenager, a lot of avoidance of my dad. Not because of him necessarily, but I think because of me. I think there were times when our relationship was strained, but more so because of me.
Yeah.
Not wanting to be vulnerable, not wanting to be.
Yeah, you told me you would do anything not to ride in the car with him alone.
Not always, but sometimes, yeah.
Just because you didn't want to talk about certain things, and
you
didn't want to open yourself up to stuff.
And he was very much so wanting to ask about my spiritual life and wanting to really dig deeper and get close to me. And I didn't, as a teenager, I resisted that so much. And now I'm a man and I need that more than ever. And he's not there. And that's really hard.
Yeah, you weren't very funny after his death.
No.
No, it kind of took you a while to get any, even your regular sense of humor. You were different. You seemed different.
Yeah.
And I don't think that humor was a way of coping. With your mom, you have used humor a lot in coping.
And I think that partially is because of the gradualness of her decline. And, she had, at the end, she had dementia. And, there is this slow grieving that happens over time.
You kind of lost her while she was still here.
In stages. In stages, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the last time I saw her, she just didn't even seem like herself. She was so in and out. We had the boys singing Hakuna Matata for her, and she loved to sing silly songs with them, but she was just barely even engaging. It was
and
so
it was
strange.
It was a day-to-day thing. Yeah. I think something that was really hard for me was being in the room with each of my parents when they passed. I don't know. It's not something that everybody does. It's not something everybody gets to do. I'm glad that I got to be with my parents when they passed, both of them.
Holding their hands.
Just trying to be a comfort as best you can, and wondering all the while, do they have any clue that I'm even here? And I like to think that they did, but at the same time, it's an image that sticks with you. And I've had, since my dad and my mom, there have been nights where I have just had some awful, I can't sleep. I can't sleep because images of that come into my head. I dream, even today, I dream about my dad. Even not necessarily about that moment. I actually just have dreams about my dad. And every time I have dreams about my dad, whether we'll be having a conversation in my dreams, and I just wake up incredibly sad. No matter what we're talking about. It could be fishing or whatever. It's not fishing, but it could be anything, and I wake up just incredibly sad. Can't go back to sleep. And then my brain goes to that moment where I was with them when they passed, and it's awful. And I can't, if I let myself get there, I can't get it out of my head, and I'll be up the rest of the night if I let it spiral into that. And it is really hard. And in fact, it's funny, that was happening with my mom for days and days after, every single day. And it was actually just one getaway to, I guess it was outside of Nashville with the Uriches and the Lollies, just hanging out with them and actually just spending some time. This was after the funeral, after.
Yeah, like a few weeks later.
Yeah, it was after, but like.
Just having fun.
And just being able to get your mind somewhere else. Because at home, I'm here thinking about the things that are going on with my family. It's all happening here. And then to just actually get out. So I guess that's another way I've coped with grief, is even by accident, is doing something, getting out, doing something, and trying to have fun as best you can.
Yeah.
Which, again, I know that doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's like what I was saying, that little part of you is always going to feel sadness. You're always, I mean, even whenever we were going up to Michigan, we talked about your mom. Right before she had her stroke, it was right after your dad passed, she went camping. She just like decided she wanted to go camping and
got a tent in the middle
had
of
never done
August or something.
It was in
like
Michigan though. She went up and
it was hot. I remember her telling me it was hot.
It's too hot.
She went. Like when we went, it was very nice.
Yeah.
It was hot. I don't think she lasted very long.
No.
Out in the wilderness.
But yeah, I think it was only like 3 days.
Yeah.
But it's just funny because we were talking about that, and we were talking about how she never got to go abroad. She always wanted to, and
that's always been hard for me.
You know, she didn't get to do the things she wanted to do.
And that's another example of how grief started early for me. It was like you and I had these plans, if we could ever afford it, to like take mom
to England,
or something. She would love it. She would just, it would have been that's like her bucket list, and just to go abroad and see all these things. And then the stroke happened, and it was an immediate like, oh, you're never gonna get to do these things.
Yeah.
But
I think it was also a lesson for us in like, if you have a goal and you want to do it, you have to do it. You have to do it while you can.
Yeah, well, we weren't financially able to do that.
I know. No, we couldn't.
Yeah.
But if you have something like that in your life, like don't put it off.
Yeah. And so I talked about how losing my dad was like, it was anger over the suddenness of it. With my mom, a lot of my grieving for that was, I actually grieved so much how hard her last few years were. And like, I thought that there was a moment where she was kind of getting to a place of living, having a normal life without my dad, because she and my dad, they were everything to each other.
I remember like the first time we went and got coffee together, like maybe it was our second date or something, and you were talking about your parents and how you weren't sure if your dad died, if your mom could even make it, because like
that's a great second date topic.
Her whole life was like service to him.
Yeah.
She just loved that.
Yeah.
She loved being a homemaker, and she loved being your dad's like quote unquote helpmeet is what they often call it. Like she was the very definition of that.
Yeah.
I think it was a big loss for her. But you had said that like she would be able to handle it better than he could, losing her, because he would just be lost without her.
Yeah.
He would just like not able to function.
Yeah. I believe that. When she lost him, she had to almost come up with a new identity. Like she had to, and she was starting, I really felt like she was starting to figure it out. And then the stroke. And then it's just like, well, that's a whole new challenge. Life-altering, terrible downward spiral challenge for over years. And that is something that I grieve the most, is just how hard the last 4 years of her life were.
Like one of my reactions to grief is anxiety. You just realize how temporary this life is, and how you aren't in control.
Yeah.
And there are just things that you can't do.
This is really uplifting.
And so like that is a lot of times my my reaction to grief, but actually the person that I most recently lost, before she died, she told me like everything is in God's hands, and I submit to that, and I am okay with that.
Yeah.
And like that gave me so much peace, and it was a good lesson for me, and I haven't felt anxious about her passing. I mean, sad, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah.
There's that emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
There's that emptiness there that that just rests with you. It's always just sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, there have been nights, I'm sure, for the last couple of weeks where you're like, I feel the need to be talking to Carolyn.
Yeah, I've gone back and looked at our messages, and that's really not a good thing for me to do. It just makes me sad. But she gave us a lot of gifts.
Yeah.
And it's hard to see all these things that she blessed us with and all these gifts that she gave us and not like assign. She's not in those things.
Sure.
You know, like actually, I mentioned I went to this flower potluck. Well, when your mom passed away, she had some flowers delivered to us, and they were in a vase that she didn't choose. You know, she just like randomly had some flowers sent to us. Anyway, I took that vase to the flower potluck, and I decided on my way home I was going to give my flowers to a friend who couldn't attend. But I was like really hesitant because that vase came from Carolyn, and I didn't want to give it away, you know?
Yeah.
But I always I collect vases and I get rid of them, but it was almost like I was giving away part of her. But that's not true. And so I decided like Carolyn loved flowers and she loved giving things. So I was like, honestly, this is a way to honor her.
I think that's a very healthy way to approach it, for sure. At the same time, as somebody who's still in the throes of going through like my mom's possessions,
yeah,
like which, you know, it's not abundant, but those things start to go away. I thought that about my dad's stuff. I mean, we have journals and old tapes of his sermons and different things, but that stuff's starting to just disappear.
You were so sad to get rid of his office chair.
Yeah.
It was like so broken down and busted out, and you're like, but this has his DNA in it.
I know.
Like, and I'm giving it to Goodwill.
Yeah.
And that, like, I know that was hard for you. You're not even really a like physical, sentimental type of person.
Can be.
Yeah.
Not typically.
And so it was kind of strange to observe that, but I'm trying not to just like hold on to everything and feel like she gave me so many books, and I took a book to a book swap that we did, and I felt really guilty about it.
Yeah.
But I wasn't going to read the book again.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no sense in this book sitting on my shelf never getting read again. So I took it, and like a girl picked it up immediately, and she was like, nonfiction about birds is my favorite. I'm so excited about this. And I was like, that's great. I'm really glad, you know, that it's going to get read. And but it is hard not to, like, the person is not in the object. But then there are these things that people tell us before they leave, like, this is really important to me and I don't want it to be given away. So your grandmother has these oil lamps that were given to her.
I didn't know about the oil lamps.
They have fake roses in them, and they were given to her and your grandfather on their 50th wedding anniversary. Were they married that long?
Yes.
That feels like too long. Anyway.
What are you saying about me? That's going to be too long.
Yeah.
You're going to need to die first.
Anyway, she really cares about these oil lamps, but nobody else cares about these oil lamps. I don't know what to do with
Yeah,
that. And your mom, she
that's
has
where I'm not sentimental.
She has a vase and a candlestick that we're getting.
Yeah.
And I remember like one of the first times I met her, she's like, this candlestick has been in our family for
100 years. It's like old.
Or more. And
you're getting it, by the way.
It's really not that cute. I know. Well, everyone else was like, I don't want this. I'm like, I'll take it.
Yeah.
I am pretty sentimental.
Yeah. And I am more than, I think, maybe the rest of my family in some ways. I mean, everybody has a little bit of sentimentality, right?
I'm a little sappy, sweet sentimental sometimes. Yeah. It's kind of gross, like how I just like when I go to an estate sale and there's like a bread bowl and it's like worn down. Like I can hold that.
You're sentimental for somebody else's past.
Seriously.
Yeah, I'm not that.
Totally just like lose it. And
I think that guy's probably a jerk.
I look at stuff and I'm like, how can somebody sell that for $2?
Because nobody wants it.
Yeah.
Supply and demand, dear. There is no demand.
I know. So I end up buying things like that. And
you are the demand.
I don't need this.
I care about this $2 worth. That's all. This lock of hair from this child in the 20s. It's worth $3 to me. Yeah. So I get that those kind of things are important to the person. I'm sorry, dear. I'm not. Whatever we have on our 50th anniversary or whatever, and we live to be 90, 100, whatever, I'm not expecting
our kids
to keep it.
But the thing is, too, I really wish I had something of my grandparents.
Our grandparents?
My grandparents.
Your grandparents?
You probably could have stuff. I mean, your grandmother's still alive.
I mean, I have my granddad's ring as my wedding ring.
That's really special.
Yeah.
I don't. I have a bowling trophy from my grandma.
That precious bowling trophy.
It's actually at my mom's house, so I don't have anything.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't give me, and she didn't really have anything.
And there's a lot of people in your family.
So many, 27 cousins.
That's a lot.
On one side, like.
Yeah.
To give everybody something.
Yeah. Well, you got the bowling trophy.
My mom got it. I think it's destined to go to me, though.
I can't wait for that day. Kathy, if you could just
hold on to the
you better keep that shiny and clean. We're ready for it. We got a spot on the shelf right behind Emily's head.
Yeah.
No, I'm not to make light of your bowling trophy. Sorry.
No, she feels it.
Yeah.
I think she feels it. She's like, gee, thanks, Sibs. Well, and that's a weird part of grief too, is when you get into the things like the financial issues. Like I have an uncle who's now estranged from my family because of financial things when a parent died.
Yeah.
And he didn't like how it all played out. And now
it happens all the time. It happens all the time. I mean, we talked to a friend where it's sort of happening. Not that long ago where that's happening to them.
Yeah.
It could get messy. Thankfully, listen, I have polycystic kidney disease and I got to be nice to my siblings in case I need their kidneys later on.
I offered mine, but your mom was a perfect match for your dad.
Yeah.
So the chances of your siblings being really great matches for you are high.
Here's the problem. And I had this epiphany. We're all getting a little older. And what I didn't realize is that I really should have been doing the long game and being really chummy with our nieces and nephews. Because they're the ones with the young, healthy kidneys.
You've been kind of a terrible uncle. I mean, like, have
You've
you ever
been kind of a terrible
them,
aunt.
Have you ever sent them a present? A card?
Have you?
Anything?
Have you?
Scarlet.
You are their aunt.
I have. I know. It is kind of weird. Like, obviously, I love my nieces and nephews.
Love you all.
Love you.
Love you so much. Love you. Love you. I need a kidney. I might need your kidney.
But like we lived abroad and you're not necessarily like always thinking, I really need to be building my relationship with my nephews. You know?
There's a very simple explanation for it. I have always loved our nieces and nephews. I adore each and every one of them. None of us have ever lived in the same town, ever. Mm-hmm. And so it's just one of those things, like, every time we see them, it's really great to see them, and it's like nothing to hang out with them and play with them, and, you know, but yeah, that very side note issue, but we should have
put forth more of an effort, though.
I agree. There's always graduation. I've got a bunch of those coming up.
We can't afford it, Jason.
Yeah. Congratulations on graduating. Don't forget me when I'm sick and on dialysis. Signed, Uncle Jason. I'm kidding.
No, I know.
Nobody owes me a kidney. I'm just playing.
Well, I told you I would give you mine. And I know it's no help to you, but I'll give it
I'll give you a reject kidney.
I can give it to someone who can give you a match. I mean,
if it works,
maybe I am a match.
Yeah, maybe.
If our meeting was so serendipitous, I wouldn't be surprised if I was a match.
Isn't everyone's, though?
No.
They all just meet by happenstance.
Match.com is not by happenstance. Do you know how many people I've met lately that have met online?
That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great thing. It actually makes so much sense. Here's a profile of who I am.
Yeah.
Let me find someone who aligns with who I am. Like, that is so ideal. It's actually almost
seems to work.
easier.
We keep meeting more and more people that,
I know.
You know, yeah.
I know. Like,
may
not
had to do it the
actually
old-fashioned
be a
way.
match.
No.
And, like, we fought a lot, didn't get along, but we, like, knew that we were supposed to be together.
See, Match.com wouldn't have put us together.
No.
But maybe it shouldn't have either. Just kidding.
I love you.
I love you too. Get out of my face. No, I'm just joking.
No, but I will say, and I might have already said this in an episode, but when I met you, you told me where you parked and I went and saw your car.
Yes. You love to tell this story. At least
I won't be marrying for money.
Yeah. Has to be for love.
I should have known then.
I thought you were about to say I should have married for money.
That's what I was saying. I should have known then.
Oh.
Yeah.
Didn't catch the joke. Too busy grieving my marriage.
And that's another interesting thing. Like, some people have to grieve something that's happening to them and they are experiencing it daily. Like, I think about people who have just really hard life circumstances, and they have to wake up and recognize the reality of their life every single day.
Yeah.
And then, like, grieve what their life could have been or would have been.
Or
if
will
such
be.
and such. Yeah, or will be.
Or what they don't get to do because of certain circumstances now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That seems like such a heavy grief.
Yeah.
Like a grief you can't escape.
Yeah.
What are the stages of grief, Jason?
Denial.
Yeah.
Anger.
So denial?
I've never dealt with
I've never
denial.
experienced denial.
No, and I definitely understand people who do.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's especially, and I don't want to get into too heavy here, but I think that's especially true with like parent-child loss. I think denial is probably huge there. I think when you're talking about someone that's older than you, it's much easier to accept. When it gets into peers or even people younger than you, that's when I think denial probably starts to hit a lot harder. And that's a guess. I've never really had to experience that much, not to any close degree. And I can't imagine it. And I hope I never have to experience that. But I can certainly understand denial. I think it all just depends on your relationship.
Yeah, and I also think like denial with maybe illness or something too, like you're grieving terminal illness.
Yeah.
Like it would be not easy to go in. Yeah, basically like I could see myself slipping into
It's an easy
denial.
trap. It's an easy trap, yeah. Of course.
Well, I guess, and I sort of do that whenever I hear about the odds. And I'm like, well, they won't
Oh, good
be.
point.
Yeah, they won't be one of those.
Yeah, well, you're it's a pre-grieving denial in a way, yeah.
Yeah.
Anger, which I sort of talked about. My anger doesn't really last long. And honestly, it's probably because listen, my dad, I'll just use what he would say, like, from verses, like, we don't mourn like those who have no hope.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I will see my parents again one day, and not in the same way, in a better way. And they believe that. I believe that. You believe that. And so anger for me doesn't last. And I understand that not everybody believes that, and they don't necessarily stay in anger. You can still make peace with yourself and not believe that. You can, I understand that. I'm just saying from my perspective,
that helps.
That helps. It definitely helps. That anger is, for me, pretty temporary. And I end up resolving to, I don't understand the overall story. I just don't, and I never will. And you have to be okay with that, regardless of what you actually believe, religiously, philosophically, whatever. You have to come to a place in your life at some point that you're not going to have all the answers. And when you realize that you don't have all the answers, and you can accept that, you're not going to be as angry. That's just how it is. I mean, denial is probably not as big of a trap either. Denial, anger. Bargaining is the next one, which I had to kind of read into bargaining because I didn't quite understand what that meant. But it's like when you start asking a bunch of what if questions, there's regret, making deals with ourselves, like I'm going to be different now, or making deals with God or whatever.
Oh, well, I totally slip into that with myself. Like, well, this is my chance to do it differently. This is my chance to actually like work on this relationship. Oh, well, this is my sign, like. And
I want to also say that none of these are either, like, we call denial a trap, but it's only a trap if you stay there, I think. None of these are bad things. They are a natural process, and not everybody goes through every one of them. They definitely don't go through them in the same order. That's been definitely true with me. I probably hit 2 out of 5 of these so far every time. It's definitely anger, and depression is the next one. Depression's in and out for me when it comes to grief. Some people, you
get really cynical about people trying to give you advice about grief, and I think that like causes you to feel depressed. I ordered a book called Experiencing Grief Whenever Your Mom Died. Like, I ordered it for me. You open it and you're like, who's sending me this junk? This isn't helpful at all. And I'm like, me? It's me.
It's for me. Sorry. Well, also, so the hospital or something, maybe the organ donation people or something, they send out a flyer about grief. And we're like, thanks. Needed this 8 years ago when my dad passed. Didn't get it then. They probably sent it to my mom, but I was there too. I think another aspect of this that is really hard for me was explaining it to our kids. When my mom died, it was their Nana. That was the first person in their life that they knew who had passed, which they knew that she was sick, and they prayed for her every night. But we told them, and that was actually almost harder for me than dealing with it myself in a way, because it was their first instance of loss.
Which Alder dealt with it really well. I mean, he's 4 years old, but we basically said, she passed, and he was like, wow, that's great. She's not in pain anymore.
Yeah. Wow. What insight.
Yeah.
If we could all feel that way.
But Oaks definitely struggles and struggled and still struggles. And he knows that Carolyn was ill, and he prays for her every night, and he still prays for her. I haven't had the heart to tell him yet. And the other day,
just so we know, Carolyn is not somebody we see physically or have seen.
No. Like, she was my friend, and I met her online, and we talked
extensively.
Yeah, that way. We had never met in person, not yet. We were planning to in the fall.
Yeah.
Go up to her farm and meet her. But anyway, he knew about her because I talked about her. She would always like relay messages through me to him.
And voice messages and stuff. Yeah.
So he said, "Is she going to die?" And I said, "I don't know, buddy." I didn't know what to say. And he was like, "Don't tell me if she does. Please just don't tell me if she does." He's so sensitive, and he just lost his Nana.
That's the part for me.
And he's like praying for her so extensively. It feels hard to say, well, sometimes our prayers are not answered.
Yeah.
That's kind of tricky. Yeah, we're just kind of at a loss trying to figure that out, trying to decide how to approach that situation. I think so many people are struggling and grieving that it's almost hard to support others in their grief because everybody's grieving something.
I agree with that. Well, everybody's going through something.
And so it is really hard to be a good friend, a good support system when you too are just in this place of sadness and grief.
Yeah. The one comfort I have is, or not the one, but a comfort I have is, I know my parents, I know that Carolyn, I know that Terry, every single one of them would not want us to be sad about their passing.
Mm-hmm.
They would want us to celebrate their life. They would want us to be happy, and they were happy people, and they would want you to know, want me to know right now, they're in a better place.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think all of those people had peace with their passing.
I think so too. Yeah.
So that makes grieving them a little easier.
It does. I think just the hardest part of it is just being on this side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't see with your eyes what is on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And as a human being, that's the source of your grief, is that you don't see the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Really.
And we can't fully understand or know.
Right. And so you grieve because what you have is faith, but you also give up your grief because what you have is faith.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting. So anyway, I don't know what this episode did for anybody.
If you're grieving and you need help, I hope that you find it. I hope that you reach out. I know that there are many programs and groups for grief, especially like in your community. I want to encourage you that if you need it, if you need the help, step out and ask for it.
And really try to find a community,
Mm-hmm.
Of just people to support you. And sometimes it's so hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to say. Half the time my community is my wife and kids. So so I get it. It's hard. It's very hard, but getting the right people on your team is a good step in the right direction. And
I do just want to clarify, we are not pregnant. I've gotten so many messages over that last podcast episode, and the reel about let's change the statistics. We're talking, but it hasn't happened. The fact that I was wearing a quilt in the YouTube version of that just caused a big stir.
Of the podcast episode?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like really, I was trying to hide something.
Guys, if she's wearing, if she has a quilt over her, it's because it's cold. It gets cold up here in this upper room. So
that was a hard and heavy topic. Next week we'll be back with something a little lighter. Thank you so much for listening to the Really Very Crunchy podcast, and we will see you next time.
So long.